Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video and myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 25th of October 2024. And my goodness, there's so much going on today. Sometimes I think I need to just do a 24-hour live. Just need to sit here and talk to you for 24 hours because there's too much information to spill out of my poor old rickety brain. Right, okay. First thing that's going to be important to mention today is that Elon Musk has just, the Wall Street Journal people have just done an article that Elon Musk has been in conversation with Putin several times since 2022 on the sly. Here's a guy that's just put $118 million into, another $35 million yesterday into Trump's campaign war chest. And you're thinking there is this connection between Russia and the US elections in many different ways, but he is fully compromised. And we hear that the Russians have been giving targeting information to the Houthi rebels to strike. I mean, how they got hold of all that weaponry anyway, and then able to strike at moving ships in the Red Sea with kind of anti-ship missiles and ballistic missiles. Okay, they're getting targeting information again, Wall Street Journal, from the Russians. I keep saying this is a world war we're involved in, and you have all these chess pieces all over the place, and some you think are your chess pieces end up being compromised in the chess pieces of the opposing player. Russia is heavily involved, it appears, in the Middle East and stopping our free trade going through the Red Sea. This is a military war, an economic war, trade war, cyber war, and an information war. And it has so many dimensions. And we have the US elections going on, most important elections possibly of all time in the US. And it's all happening. It is all happening. Anyway, aside from that, there's hits and losses video. So let's get on to what is a staggering statistic again. Another really heavy day for the Russians. Some categories very high indeed. 1,630 personnel lost is a huge number. It's the third highest number I think that we have seen. 7 tanks lost as well. That is just a bit below the daily average, but still I think somewhat significant. 33 armoured personnel vehicles, well over the daily average. 34 artillery systems, likewise, sort of almost double in both cases. 2 MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Haven't seen so many anti-aircraft warfare systems from the general staff figures, although there have been a few popping up here and there in the visuals, such as reported by Andrew Perpetua. We've seen Strelas and Books. Quite a few Books actually lost recently, and they're not cheap. They're like 100 million a pop. So 79 fuel tanks, vehicles and fuel tanks. That's pretty high in that category. 22 pieces of special equipment, likewise, very high numbers there. So some really significant numbers. I think the Russians are losing. Like, there are some videos coming out of just lots and lots of vehicles getting taken out. The Russians definitely are losing stuff at unsustainable rates. The question is, how long can they sustain this right now? I mean, it's unsustainable, as in you can't keep doing that forever. And it's already changed behaviour. So we're seeing more motorcycles and buggies being used on the front line. We've seen even cars being used to drop troops off at the contact line, right? So that has shown that when I've said, like, months and months, a year ago, that these losses are unsustainable, that's what it means. It means you can't sustain attacking with 60 vehicles, 60 mechanised vehicles in a huge set of columns. You know, you can't sustain doing that. So it is empirically been the case that these losses have been unsustainable. What does unsustainable mean now? Well, I think, you are starting to see more M46 artillery pieces being used and lost on the front lines. You're starting to see much older vehicles. You're starting to see stockpiles run out. So the claim yesterday was T-80s are pretty much almost run out in the stockpiles. That's what we mean by unsustainable. So these figures really are unsustainable. When you talk about troops, 10,000 troops from North Korea is a sign that those losses over time have been unsustainable for the Russians. How do they keep throwing men at the problem? Well, first of all, there have been a couple of cases of female convicts being seen on the front line, so it's not just men. But North Korea, these convict groups, people from abroad, that shows that the change of behaviour shows the unsustainability of these losses. Okay, now we're going to go on to 2 days worth of Andrew Perpetua losses because we missed the one from yesterday. As you can see here, More losses from the Russians and Ukrainians. If we take out the pink on both sides, that's kind of comms equipment that isn't necessarily as expensive, or is more easily replaceable, you can argue. Then we have pretty similar. Actually, the Ukrainians losing a tad more in the combat asset losses there, so that's a little bit significant. Russians losing more trucks and civilian vehicles. Okay, after the comms equipment, we've got a couple of boats. We have 2 pieces of artillery, including a D-30 for the Ukrainians. We have a couple of tanks damaged, and then infantry fighting vehicles, 5 of those. 1 captured YPR 765, that's the Dutch version of the M113. We have another abandoned CV90, so they've lost quite a few of these recently. These Swedish infantry fighting vehicles are really the best that you can get. Bradley, that sounds like a Gillette advert. We have a damaged Bradley as well, so lost a few of them recently. APCs, quite a number of these, most of them over 50% destroyed, abandoned, or captured. Captured Senator, they really have had quite a number of pieces of kit captured now. M113, Humvee, Senator, and then abandoned, and then a whole bunch of M113s basically destroyed or damaged. Striker thrown in, Humvee and a Senator. Mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, again, Western provided vehicles, all of them, or their own indigenously made or Western provided, because the Kozak 7s are Ukrainian. So about a half a dozen of those, 7 of those damaged, destroyed, or abandoned. So nothing like crazy valuable, but they are losing things like CV90s and Bradleys, and so there needs to be a consistent supply of those vehicles to replace those losses. Right, for the Russians, a lot of comms equipment, recovery vehicle, engineering vehicle. Then we get down to the howitzers, D20s and 30s predominantly. That tells you quite a bit. A range of tanks, T72s, T80s, infantry fighting vehicles, 100% of them destroyed or abandoned. Not as many as the Ukrainians though, but they still, 8 of them there still irretrievably lost, it appears. BMP 1s, 2s and 3s, and then a few APCs, 100% lost, destroyed or abandoned, but only 4 of them. And then trucks, civilian vehicles and ATVs being lost at large numbers. And then, to talk to what I was mentioning earlier, these motorcycle losses indicate that, and these car losses I would also add, but certainly the motorcycles and buggies indicate that the Russians' behaviour has changed compared to 2 years ago, right? And that is indicative of just huge losses across the front line. Then we go to yesterday's losses, much more in favour of the Ukrainians here, with the Russians losing an awful lot more in terms of combat asset losses, probably 3-to-1 ratio there, maybe even 4-to-1 ratio. So much better for the Ukrainians. Let's have a look at the Ukrainian losses. We have a couple of bits of artillery being destroyed, including a Bogdana self-propelled gun that they make themselves. That'll hurt a little bit. M109 as well, piece of artillery taken out. And then we have a single tank, few APCs, a VAB M113 Humvee, couple of captured MRAPs, some Kozak 7s, and a Varta abandoned. So 100% of their APCs and MRAPs are Western provided or indigenously made. Trucks and civilian vehicles, not a huge number of trucks, a few civilian vehicles there, but double the amount for the Russians here. And we're going to start with a damaged Strela 10 for the Russians, an electronic warfare bit of equipment also destroyed there. A couple of engineering vehicles, and then lo and behold, what do we have with artillery? We have D20s, D30s, M46s, another couple of M46s. We are seeing more and more M46s lost, and that means that they are desperate in order to have to use these howitzers that were designed in 1946 to 50 and put into production in 1951, I think. So we're in 2024, almost 2025. That is 75-year-old howitzers. Absolutely incredible. We have a T90M destroyed and possibly another one damaged. So that's a bit of a sore loss for the Russians there. A couple of T80s. And then for the infantry fighting vehicles, usual candidates, BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTR 82s, and so on and so forth. Likewise with APCs, BTR 80s, 70s, and MTLBs. Bathtub 1 with shed. Hilarious. So these are some of the sort of Frankenstein vehicles that you see, and something to keep a smile on Andrew Perpetua's face, that's for sure. He's also listed a number of ATVs, four-wheelers, quads, and buggies, golf buggies, a Desert Cross 1000-3, more motorcycles, and obviously cars, pickups, and loafs, etc., etc. Those are the Scooby-Doo vans. So the Russians losing just phenomenal amounts of kit. And then when we see this data and we see the claims from the General Staff, particularly in terms of the personnel there, we can then go and look at and see whether we are justified in believing these claims. Obviously, we're justified in believing Andrew Perpetua's claims because each one of these has a geolocated piece of visual evidence to support it. You can't see it on here, on this screen grab, but actually if we go to below, remember he puts it in the document there. So each of these losses has an accompanying URL. So we are definitely justified in believing that. And then when we come to other supporting data, CryptoWiki has a thread. Russian commanders are said to expect only 2% of convict soldiers to survive assaults and are punishing soldiers who do survive on the assumption that they are still alive. It shows that they've disobeyed their orders. I've often thought that the convict troops are really truly expendable troops. These are people that I guess the commanders have little respect for. They kind of, the way they see it, and of course I wouldn't think this in terms of human value, etc., etc. But I think the way that the commanders, or the Russians, certainly the Kremlin, see this is these are truly expendable people that are costing us money to incarcerate and do a pretty poor job at trying to rehabilitate. So rather than have these people get let out of prison and so that they fight for us, but then serve whatever contract it is and get reintroduced to society, which then causes very often further problems. We've seen murderers get pardoned and then go back and murder straight away. Same with rapists, etc., etc. So rather than have these people reintegrate into society, the Russian Kremlin arguably, and this is me speculating, but would arguably they would prefer that these people were used in meat assaults to gain meters on the ground, to gain kilometers on the ground, but actually to sacrifice their lives. They don't really want these people back. Yeah, okay, you chose to join the army. This is your choice, even as a convict. We didn't make you do this. Asterisks there, of course. But I'm sure they would be putting pressure on those commanders to say, look, here are your expendable troops. We don't really want them back. Go and use them accordingly. And as a result, they're only expected, 2% of them only are expected to survive. That's a 98% mortality rate. It's absolutely staggering. 2 Russian convict soldiers who are currently on the run after deserting, Vyacheslav Trutnev and Dmitry Ostrovsky, have recorded a new video accusing their deputy commander of imprisoning and causing the deaths of men who have survived assaults. The pair were last seen... yes, this is quite famous video that's doing the rounds, actually. The pair were last seen in a couple of rap videos where they recorded to publicise their complaints against their commander Prokop. This time they've made allegations about the 109th Regiment's deputy commander who uses the call sign Caspian. The men say that in July 2024, 15 men of their unit survived an assault and returned to Russian positions, but were lined up by Caspian. They say that he accused them of failing to complete the mission, and the survival rate of convicts supposedly should not exceed 2%. So when I'm talking about this is coming down from on high, this is the point, is that you've got, if we can believe this, you've got the deputy commander saying, we should not, there's an obligation there, we should not have a convict survival rate of higher than 2%. That's incredible. Several of the men were wounded, but they were not allowed to go to hospital. One of them was recumbent and on a drip and was forced to stand upright while Caspian shouted at them, "Why the F did you come back? You're alive. Convicts have only a 2% survival rate," etc., etc. They walked a certain number of meters towards the Ukrainians, as many as they needed. Why he decided that they had not done so is unclear, and in the form of, so to speak, punishment, he decided to throw them into a pit. This cellar that closes, likely a zindan. So we've seen, this is a cellar that closes. We've seen a number of accounts of these zindans. Quote, and the wounded, he threw them all in there. They did not feed them in this cellar. They did not give them water. Well, maybe a bottle for how many people there were. That's all, but just so they wouldn't die of thirst, that's all. But they certainly didn't give them food. 3 of the wounded died immediately in a cellar, and the remaining 12 people, some wounded, some intact, he sent to carry out an assault immediately, without weapons, without armor, without anything. According to the men, all 12 convicts died in the unarmed assault. They killed their own men, in short. If something goes wrong, people's lives are not valued, in short. Trutnev and Ostrovsky say. The dead were listed as deserters rather than missing, presumably to deny their relatives any compensation. This is something else that we hear about quite consistently. They are considered AWOL with us until the body is pulled out. We are recorded as AWOL, not even as missing in action. So that's a little bit of a jigsaw piece to throw at the jigsaw puzzle. Kiev Post reported on the 22nd that North Koreans are in Ukraine, which you kind of know about, but that 8 officers have been killed in action, says a Chinese mercenary. So a Chinese mercenary fighting for Russia claimed that 8 Pyongyang officers were killed in action during their first day of deployment in Ukraine. Now, of course, pinch of salt and all that, but this appears to be a genuine Chinese mercenary making these claims. And then we hear that there is a shortage of infantry in Kursk. Now, we kind of know that because the North Koreans have been pulled into Kursk, supposedly. Shortage is such that Russia formed a rifle regiment from units of the strategic missile forces to be sent to Kursk. I did my frontline update late last night, and I was saying, look, I get this sense that both sides are really on a knife edge here, that they are both desperate, and actually the front lines are far more brittle than you might think. And I think that's definitely the case for the Russians. Yes, they are having success, but they're having success because they're throwing people at this problem in a kind of in a way that shows they don't care for their lives, like we've just heard. But I think again, to use the term in an unsustainable way, these are short-term gains, but I don't know how well they will be able to defend the gains that they make, and it all depends on how many people the Ukrainians are able to throw at counterattacks, and is counterattacking the best way of taking back territory, or a negotiation is the best way? You know, what do the Ukrainians want to do in terms of conserving their own resources and personnel? It's a fascinating time of the war here from a purely not, let's take the emotion out of it and just look at this strategically in terms of resources, etc., etc. Apparently, the North Koreans won't be enough, and, quote, Russia will nuke NATO. It's a threat taken seriously only in Washington and Berlin, but not in Moscow. So here we have, another Russian giving his tuppence about this. So we've heard that the Kuznetsov, the Russian carrier, their only carrier that's now pretty much out of action forever, it seems, up in the naval port up north, that has forced the Russians to mobilize the crew from there and send them to the front line as infantry, because there's no point having a crew of an aircraft carrier that are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs as the aircraft carrier has been out of action for 8 years or whatever it is, and it's not looking like getting fixed anytime soon. Then we hear that drone operators being sent on the front line, and in fact that account of those 2 drone operators, Ernest and what's his name, who the mill bloggers went mental about, well, apparently they've been posthumously given an award. So this is how much that has affected morale, and how those criticisms of the situation there have actually found purchase in the military hierarchy. And it's not just people complaining on Telegram. It's not just psyops from the Ukrainian side. These are genuine complaints that Russians are having that are leading to ramifications. And here, further complaints. So I really do think we are justified in believing that the Russians aren't in a good place. Now the question is, of course, where are the Ukrainians in comparison? Now, then there are just so many videos coming out at the moment of destroyed equipment. So you kind of trying to make sense of these stats that are coming out. Like every day, you're seeing 20, 30, sometimes 40 armored personnel vehicles claimed to be lost in a single day, and then maybe 10 tanks, and then you see these loss lists that kind of verify this, and they are referring to videos like this. So here is the road of death. I've got 2 videos here that I think are different. I've gone through them. They look, I don't know if they're some of the similar footage, but this is what's called the road of death. Now the Ukrainians have done a counterattack at Zeleny Shylak in the Kursk region, and the road between Snagost coming from the west towards Zeleny Shylak is just absolutely rammed full of Russian destroyed vehicles, and the Ukrainians are doing an absolutely incredible job with their with their drones, just mullering these vehicles. Just incredible amounts of destroyed equipment. I think it might be there are yeah, that is the same footage actually. Come to think of it, so but I'm sure there are elements of this one's a longer piece. I think it's got a longer introduction. I think it's been snipped here. But if we look at this now, just get a sense of the sheer number of bits of kit that the Russians have lost in this. Yeah, of course that happens because I clicked above that. Why are you so stupid? Not me. I'm not stupid, obviously. It's Twitter that's stupid. Just, yeah, so much destroyed equipment. I could just click all along here and you're just getting things blown up all over the shop. It's just an absolute graveyard of equipment. And I think at the end, yeah, there it gives you a count of all the equipment lost there, I believe, 207 pieces. But I can't read that. It'd be interesting. Anyone that can read that, I'd be interested to know what that is saying. But yeah, just huge numbers of pieces of kit being lost. We have this guy. This guy's actually fighting for the Ukrainians. Let's have a see. A private entrepreneur before the full-scale invasion. Right now, serving the Ukrainian Marine Corps. So this is Kriegsforscher. He says, kind of memishly, how it feels to see how Russian 155 Marine Brigade, who executed dozens of Ukrainian POWs, dies every day in the Kursk area, just like this. Okay, his point is this thread is about the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. The guys that were down in Vladimir that have been reconstituted like 9 times. In fact, someone references that in the comments below. And they have been absolutely mauled of late in Kursk. So although the Ukrainians are losing ground in Kursk, the Russians are being made to pay for that, and they're having to throw 50,000 people plus get another 10,000 North Koreans into Kursk in order to take that territory back. But they're losing vast amounts of equipment and personnel as well. So 1 destroyed BTR-82A and 10 Marines near it. Love it. 100 meters away from it, 3 more. Oh la la. So, okay, bear in mind this is someone fighting for the Ukrainians, delighting in the death of Russians, right? And you can imagine, for obvious reasons. He says 2 tanks, 6 BMP-3s, 2 BTR-82As, 3 Akamat, 4 NTLBs, 1 truck, 2 unknown AFVs, 1 BRDM, 1 BTR-MDM. Just in one village with only 1 street. Amazing. 137th Regiment and 155th Marine Brigades. Keep going. And then he updates it with 2 2nd Assault Battalion, 83rd Brigade, 3 BMP-2s and 1 T-80 BV, and then an assault battalion from the 155th Marine Brigades, 1 BMP-3, active morning. And it's just going on and on. And yeah, lots of people talking about this, and the 155th, giving them a bit of a hard time for obvious reasons. But yeah, these are the guys that have been mauled down in Vuhledar and are getting an absolute mauling in Kursk. Of course, the Ukrainians are going to be losing stuff. The question is, are the Russians being forced to pay more for their gains than vice versa? Okay, then we see other bits and pieces of video evidences: an exploding Buk-M2 air defense system that does its usual. The reason I showed you that little bit because we're going to look at something else, and I think it looks like a decoy going the other way actually. So this is a Buk-M2 air defense system. $100 million piece of kit. HIMARS MLRS missile hit the enemy installation. It burned down along with the crew. It's designed to intercept airplanes, helicopters, drones, and cruise missiles. In addition to the launch of the complex, includes a command and control center, a detection and targeting station, and a radar station. Those don't seem to have been destroyed. Right. Oops, I didn't mean to show you that. So actually, we're going to go to the next. Here, yeah, this is it. Okay, so this is an IRIS-T, like a German-provided IRIS-T system that was hit. So this is a really decent bit of kit, modern air defense system, either medium or short range, and the explosion there just produces this white puff of smoke, and that has led Pete. So Sarin here just says, they've lost an IRIS-T air defense system. Someone else does say RIP decoy system, no secondary. That's a decoy. Lots of people saying, I expect big fireworks, solid rocket motors, the interceptors getting hit. Just as if there's white smoke like that, you are, I think, justified in thinking it is a decoy. It might well be a decoy. We know they do operate decoys of the Iris-T. I'm pretty sure that. Whether it is for sure, I don't know. It might have just been a direct hit that doesn't cause a cook-off. They're not always going to cause cook-offs. So anyway, there is that. This is fascinating because I've said this on my frontline updates many a time. So these are these spoils heaps that you see around the Donbass at these coal mining industrial towns where these are 10 a penny, and they provide really good viewpoints of the landscape, right? So on the one hand, it means you can get up there, you can get your mortar crews up there, your ATGM crews up there, and you've got really good sights and you can hammer the enemy, right? But on the other hand, you stick out like a sore thumb. And I've said this to you many times. And here we have, just up here, we have an ATGM crew that, honestly, it's incredible, this footage. I can't show it to you because it involves people getting hit with drones. But basically, this TGM crew, there's this drone that appears to be like a spotter drone. And then you just have drone after drone just slamming into them. And then someone runs away, rolls down, sort of runs down here and then runs along here and then goes into like a mini like trench bit and then gets hit by another drone and that's in dead. And but once this is hit, it gets hit and hit again. And this is that's the setup. There's a drone there. You see one drone just lands and rolls over and then gets back up again. I don't know if that's the same drone that then goes in and blows it up. And then just bish, bash, bosh. I think that might be a drone there. And this is, it's an incredible bit of footage because one, it does show you that these positions that you take up you are right out in the open. There's no cover. There are no trees growing on. These are slag heaps, right? You're up there. You can easily be seen. They try and camouflage themselves, but it doesn't really work. And the amount of drones that are just hammering into this one position is quite incredible. And basically, that's what's left. That is a drone that didn't explode, I think. That's the one that fell over. And then, yeah, it just got absolutely mauled, this position. And all the people, I think, in that position were taken out. So just drones. It's all about the drones, isn't it? And speaking of which, I had that conversation with Alex from NAFO yesterday talking about interceptor drones because they're starting to fund interceptor drones. He said some of them do just hit the reconnaissance drones and try and take them out, but they generally have small explosives on them now. And I'm going to show you this. This is a pretty incredible bit of footage because this is the first time I have seen. I don't know if this drone that we're looking from is a spotter drone or whether it's another interceptor drone that would be trying to take this out, but another drone just zooms past it. You'll see, let's make sure the music's off. We'll see here that the drone zooms past it. There you go. So you've got two drones trying to either take this out or one drone spotting for the other. And then here we see the interceptor drone explode and absolutely maul this reconnaissance drone. And that is definitely an explosion, and that fully takes out the drone. Now, other times we see the drone attach itself to the reconnaissance drone, and it's kind of wrangling with it, and they kind of fall out the sky, and there's no explosion. It could be that the munition didn't go off, or it could be that there was no explosive device on board. So I think there's probably different ways of taking out these interceptors. Of course, these interceptors need to go high because the reconnaissance drones go much higher than normal drones, and they need to go fast, and they need to have good battery power. So these interceptor drones do have slightly different specifications. Right. This video, I can't show it to you again, etc., etc. But for you Aussies out there, these will all be linked in the video below. For you Aussies out there that like a bit of props here, this is such a typical Aussie interaction. So you've got some guys fighting like, well, as this person says, absolute effing legends. Aussies pushing back a Russian assault in Zaporizhia. So these are obviously Aussie volunteers with the International Legion or something. And there's just such an Australian part of this where it's like, you effing see, as he's like repeatedly firing his gun in like the most Aussie way. It's just like they like a bit of the C word and the F word and put them together with firing a machine gun and you are an assault rifle and you are in Aussie heaven there. So just, yeah, brilliant. Just a lot of whooping and hollering Aussie style. So if you want to feel good about yourself, you bloody Aussie legends, go and Go and watch that one, mate. Look, it's a great view. Had to be done. And then here we have some fascinating news. Talk about losses. I don't know if this is just. I've seen this reported in two different ways. It could be just a bit of contretemps between Akhmat and regular Russian forces. But then what are regular Russian forces doing in Chechnya? So this is a Chechnya where a Rosgvardia convoy, so these are kind of military police, was ambushed and in the Grozny district. And according to information, a military Eurotroc in which there were employees of the occupation structures was shot. 3 employees were possibly killed. The attackers fled. So I don't know if these are Russians being shot or whether these are Chechnyans being shot, and whether this is Chechnya against Russia or rebel Chechnyans against Russians or other Chechens. If it's rebel Chechens, then that's really good news for the Ukrainians. If it's just a bit of an issue between conventional Russian forces and Chechens, then we have seen that before. But this has led to the death of shooting and death of military personnel. So that is potentially significant. Right. I'm going to go on to a slightly different subject here that Brendan Kelly from Touchney has been sending me. He's been sending me a bunch of stuff on sabotage, particularly of railway, but also vehicles. And he's sort of maybe even mentioned writing an article on this. So National Police and the Security Service of Ukraine have detained 5 suspects in arson on the order of the Russian Special Services. So as in the arson was on the order of the Special Services. So these are at railway facilities and also defence force facilities. For example, in Odessa, law enforcement officers detained 3 local men who set fire to a Volkswagen transporter minibus belonging to a soldier of the armed forces of Ukraine. In addition, the attackers set fire to signal equipment of one of the city's railway stations. The defendants filmed the crimes and sent them to the customer, but did not receive money for the work performed. After the detention, the officers were handed over to the SBU. The offenders, were handed over to SBU officers in the Odessa region. Another fact of arson was documented in the police in the Kiev region. The attackers set fire to a relay cabinet of the rail Ukralintia. The equipment was not damaged. Law enforcement officers conducted a number of search activities and identified 2 arsonists, one of them a local resident previously convicted of drug trafficking and hooliganism, who involved a 16-year-old accomplice in subversive activities in favour of Russia, so on and so forth. So lots of this kind of stuff going on. We see it on Telegram. So here's an account here in Dnipro. So this is a different one. A man committed sabotage on a railway and set fire to a car of a soldier of the armed forces of Ukraine. Under the procedural guidance in Dnipropetrovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office, the citizen was served a notice of suspicion of sabotage committed under martial law, obstruction of the legitimate activities of the armed forces of Ukraine during a special period, and intentional damage to someone else's property by arson. According to the investigator, a 32-year-old resident of Dnipro, having a pre-purchased flammable liquid with him, poured it over and set fire to a relay cabinet at a railway station. In addition, he set fire to a Volkswagen Caravella car, which belonged to the military of the armed forces of Ukraine. He filmed his actions on a mobile phone and made sure that no one interfered with the arson. During the search, law enforcement officers seized a lighter, a bottle of flammable liquid, and a mobile phone with their evidence of the illegal activities, etc., etc. And then we have here another one in Dnipropetrovsk, where we have a 16-year-old boy in Nikopol. So that's just north of the Zaporizhia reservoir, as was. Intentional destruction of someone else's property by arson. Suspects received an offer of quick money from an unidentified person through a bot in the messenger, communicating with the so-called employer. They were tasked with setting fire to a railway facility. So they doused the flammable liquid and set fire to a relay cabinet on a railway track in the Nikopol district. After the deed, a photo was sent and video report of the work done to the customer. For this, they received a reward of $350. It's interesting there. So you've got 2 guys doing that, $350. That's not a bad return on investment, given that would otherwise be a relatively easy thing to do and get away with. It's terrible. It's horrible, and I can't believe that you do this against your country, etc., etc. But just to understand why people are doing this, right? So what is the motivation? Are they ideologically linked? They don't necessarily have to be. This can be someone that says, well, I don't like the Russians, but if they're going to pay me $350, I really need $350. 16-year-old kids like, yeah, easily swayed maybe, $350. Yeah, that goes quite a long way in Dnipropetrovsk maybe. So that's the understanding there. What do you do about this? Well, really good intel and education. And the problem is that these guys probably also need prospects. And living close to a war zone where the economic prospects and it's not exactly a high aspiration society or community in that area, I wouldn't have thought it's going to be difficult, and people are going to be, I think, susceptible to these kinds of temptations, or they are just fully ideologically aligned with the pro-Russian point of view. And here we've got another one, actually summing up Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, and Cherkasy region. So in the Cherkasy region, 2 residents of Uman, aged 16 and 21, were detained in hot pursuit while who during the day burned a multivan and an SUV of the armed forces of Ukraine, and who were undergoing maintenance after performing combat missions in the front. And then, Odessa relay cabinets, 8 relay cabinets set on fire. So this is something that's happening an awful lot. I just thought I'd highlight this to you. Those relay cabinets, we see them burning in Russia, but don't think that's not happening in Ukraine as well. And it is definitely an issue. There are some serious sabotage going on inside Ukraine. Okay, in terms of distance munitions, the Russians launched their typical large wave of drones, 63 of them. 11 remain unaccounted for, but some of them were still in the air, so I'm not quite sure how many got through. Basically, of the 63, 36 were shot down and 16 fell due to electronic warfare, so that gives you 52. So that's 11, but some of them were still in the air. So I don't really know how many got through, if any, in the end, and what damage they might well have done. But as we see, this is happening every single night, and it's the same theory as the way they do their infantry attacks on tree lines or particular positions, where they say, right, we're going to attack with 50 people and we hope that 5 get through, and then we're going to attack with 50 people the next day, I hope 5 get through. And after like 4 days of doing that, you've got 20 people holding that. Yeah, you've lost almost 200 people, but you've got that tree line with 20 people holding it. It's the same with these drones. Yeah, we'll send 50 across and we hope that 5 get through, 3 get through, 2 get through. You do that every night, and then after a month of 30 days of 2, 3, 5 getting through, you've got 100 drones having destroyed their targets. And that is, I guess, success for the Russians. It's not that one drone, and I'm going to make this up, but say one drone costs $100,000, and you fire at the Ukrainians hoping that drone gets through. It's actually that you equate it differently. So it's 100 drones cost 100 times 100,000, and then you're expecting like 10 of them to get through, and that's how you equate it. And then you divide that 10 by the cost of all those 100 drones, and that's how much a single drone hitting costs. It's just a different way of working it out, but that's how I think they'll be equating the cost of these drones. Officials in Fredonetsk confirmed this morning that 2 people died in an attack on a Novopochta building. So it's a post office, private post office. It does a really good job, Novopochta. That's not from any overnight strikes. That's just generally what goes on, as we know, on a daily basis with artillery strikes near the front lines. This is, Donetsk near Druzhkivka, Oleksievo Druzhkivka near Kramatorsk. That gets hammered on a daily basis. All of those, that semicircle of cities and towns behind Cheziv Yar and going north up to Seversk. Okay, now moving on. So no news again of Ukrainian strikes, and no Ukrainian strikes for a good couple of days into Russia. Although I think there sometimes are, like I've said to you before, we don't always hear about them. So there's talk about a radar facility being taken out in Cape Tarkankut in Crimea from 2 nights ago, I think. It came out yesterday, and of course there was no news about any strikes. And then suddenly, oh yeah, there's a radar thing that was taken out. So actually, there's not to say there weren't any strikes last night. We just don't know about them. Okay, let's get on to a few bits and pieces from my other section. Naval logistics of Russia in the Azov Black Sea region are essentially dead. So that's the Black Sea, Crimea, and then northeast of Crimea, top right, you have that Sea of Azov that has Berdyansk, Mariupol, Taganrog, and a bit of the Russian coast as well. That's all in the Sea of Azov. Apparently, that's just dead to the Russian Navy. Russian landing ships have been moved to Novorossiysk, while others are stuck in Crimea for repairs, where Ukrainian forces continue to degrade them. As a result, the Russians have lost their ability to use the Black Sea Fleet for military operations and logistics. Ouch. And I don't think we give enough props to Ukraine for effectively, functionally destroying the Black Sea Fleet in the way that they have. It's absolutely incredible. For a nation that doesn't really have an active, functional navy, that's incredible. Sorry, I need my tea breaks. It's too many late nights. South Korean intelligence has confirmed that North Korea has ammunition remaining for 3 more months of war. So Yonhap news agency from South Korea stating this. If this is true, that is freaking massive. So if the North Korean only have ammunition remaining for 3 more months of the war, that is big news, because Russia won't be able to rely on North Korea in a meaningful way. It's been an interesting analysis, actually. I think I've got it in my Geopolitics update. Is that satellite imagery analysis of North Korea has shown that it is now brighter since 2022. It has been brighter than it has ever been before. In other words, North Korea somehow has a bit more energy, somehow has a bit more propensity to light its houses up, because it's traditionally quite a dark place. It's absolutely horrendous poverty and whatnot in a completely command economy. This is interesting because it could be that they are getting a lot more than just nuclear technology from the Russians, which is a huge hydrocarbon nation. So what's been going on in North Korea to see that kind of change. Right, Russian businessman linked to Victor Bout. So Victor Bout was the was it God of War, Lord of War, the film with Nicolas Cage? I haven't seen it, but it's about this arms dealer who was swapped. If you remember, he was swapped is that the Brittany Griner swap? Anyway, a guy connected to him has died on a plane shot down in Sudan. So if you remember, there's an IL-76 shot down in Sudan accidentally by its own forces, and it's Russian, and it was thought to have Russian military equipment going to Sudan. Viktor Granov, though, is thought to have died on that. Documents were found among the wreckage of an IL-76 transport plane shot down on Monday, linked to the arms dealer Victor Bout. Victor Bout is an arms dealer whom the United States exchanged, for Brittany Griner. According to 2005 report by human rights organisation Amnesty International, Granov is linked to Bout. The Russian businessman ran 2 airlines accused of violating an arms embargo on Congo. Reuters citing an RSF, so they are the rebel, are they the rebels or the government forces of Sudan, says the downed IL-76 was used to drop weapons, ammunition and food to the besieged town of El Fasher. Sudan is now in the midst of a civil war. The IL-76 went down on the 21st near Darfur. According to Sudan War Monitor Project, the plane was shot down by RSF members, mistakenly think it was a bomber. So they are the rebels. So there you go. Russia just heavily involved, but actually getting a bit of a bloody nose from losing that airplane. Now, interesting here. So we see this quite a lot, writing on bombs on both sides and missiles. This is for this or this is for that. This is for the children's hospital that you took out. This use of a Russian bomb to send a protest to the Russian Ministry of Defense over non-payment of bonus pay has set off a furore in the Russian Air Force, with an entire unit stood down and undergoing an epic effing for about 8 hours, and that's a quote there. The fighter bomber Telegram channel reports on the inevitable repercussions of the airmen's protest. Everyone who within reach of the senior command was punished. Now, fighter bomber recently came out with a bit of a what are we doing? Why are we all just a bunch of criminals? Talking about crimes taking place by Russians, and there's some cracks showing. Anyway, quote, in short, after the bomb became unbearable and it clearly and understandably suggested that separate headquarters and commanders do not have full information about what is happening in the military units entrusted to them, do not know the current needs and aspirations of the fighters, and are engaged in the usual deception and misleading their immediate commanders, reporting that everything is fine, there are no problems. These same top commanders began to sort things out, and the villages have been burning for 3 days. Preparation of combat flights is effed. Everyone is writing explanatory notes, since, as it is well known, quote, there are no fools sitting at the top. These same non-fools, tongue-in-cheek, recognised the bomb in the photo as a Fab 3000 with an UMPK glide kit, which they immediately reported to their leadership. This bomb is used by only one well-known unit, which was immediately subjected to epic effing for about 8 hours, during which a unit tearfully persuaded the fools upstairs to open their eyes to ask someone who could tell them that the photo of a mass-produced OFAB 250 with the UMPK, which is nowadays used by everyone without exception. Miraculously, they managed to do this in just 24 hours. The rest is a matter of technique. Not finding the perpetrators according to tradition, culprits were immediately appointed. The perpetrators were the crew, who had nothing to do with these inscriptions, which they certified in documents in the form of explanatory notes. But since the perpetrators should have been uncovered long ago, their mother effing dismantlers don't give a damn about all these little things. The crew was suspended from flights, combat operations, and in a couple of days they must appear before the bright eyes of himself. Meanwhile, people in the audience are telling us that non-payments have already been discovered in 2 air armies, not counting the infantry, which no one even mentioned in the showdowns. That in addition to the bombers, the fighter aircraft pilots did not receive additional payments either, but non-payments are different. Their non-payments are more likely to F the investigators than they are to F them. Therefore, the crew of the fighter bombers was sacrificed in order for the servicemen in the Air Force and maybe the entire army to start receiving the required cash payments. I hope representatives of the Military Prosecutor's Office and the Military Counterintelligence will at least talk to this crew before and after the conversation to assess the scale of the effed up situation and the epic nature of the investigation into this terrible crime. And the inscription appeared by itself. The icons are streaming myrrh, and the bombs, how are bombs worse? So I don't understand all of how he's putting this together. But anyway, of course, our military will carry out their assigned tasks without these payments and generally for free. And in some places, they even pay themselves to carry them out officially. But that not should be. Okay, the broad point here is that, and this is what Ukrainians are going to want to see as well, is you've got massive arguments between different elements here of the Russian armed forces, and you've got non-payment. You've got Russian military personnel not being paid for their job in adequate ways, and that probably indicates a lack of money as much as like a organizational hiccup, chaos. I mean, all of this is what Ukraine wants to see, and they want to see people infighting. They want to see investigations into why things are happening. They want to see public complaints of the nature of this photo. I mean, all of this is exactly what they want to see. Dear Ministry of Defence, it says, I'm Fab with the UMPK. Soon I will fly to destroy occupiers in Kursk Oblast. I'm upset for my crew. They have not received bonus pay for counter-terrorist operations since August. Sort it out. P.S. You can make mistakes, but you can't lie. In other words, this isn't just a mistake. This is deception coming from the Russian powers that be. So fascinating stuff. Good news for the Ukrainians, and kind of rather similar here to fighter bomber being a bit eyes open to sort of criminality going on. Not just with what we just saw with non-payment, but in general, like that comment I said that he said the other day that was quite interesting. Here we've got Aptia Laudanov from the Akhmat, guy in charge of Akhmat, the Chechen special forces that actually have a lot of Russians in them now, admitted that the Russian military committed 187 crimes in the Kursk region. These are murders, rapes, and others, but allegedly none of them were committed by Akhmat. So again, you've got this tension between two elements of the Russian armed forces here, where you got and like I said earlier with the hit on that Ural truck in Chechnya, you know, could this be an issue between Akhmat and conventional Russians? Well, here we've got the Akhmat leader saying that the Russians are going and committing crimes, which we know about in Kursk. We know they've been looting for a start. We've seen they record themselves on videos looting their own shops. It's not the Ukrainians looting the shops. It's the Russians themselves looting their own shops. And here we have a situation whereby you've got the Akhmat commander admitting this and railing against it, but saying, of course, it's not the Akhmat, right? Of course, it's not the Akhmat. Right, moving on quickly. So, I don't know if this is relevant for the whole, like, larger regional shenanigans going on, but unverified reports that there is a nuclear facility near Tehran that was on fire. bit of an issue, that one. I thought I'd throw that in there. And finally, BBC Verifies extensively reported on AI-influenced operation run by Moscow-based former Florida cop John Mark Dugan. Dugan. Washington Post now says it's seen documents that show Dugan has directly been working with Russian military intelligence. I reported on this guy before. Just it blows my mind that Americans or any kind of Western peeps seem to be like drawn in by the Russian narrative. That, like, why would you think Russia is a better place to go and live and be a part of, and why is it you think that their foreign policy of invading a sovereign nation is morally what you want to work for? Just incredible. American creating deepfakes targeting, in this case, Kamala Harris, works with Russian intel, documents show. But just watch out for disinformation. There's so much of it flying around. We are in a truly difficult time with regard to knowing what is right and what is wrong. This, as I call it, epistemic crisis, where epistemic security, the security of what we know to be true or don't know to be true, it's all up for grabs. And I'm just going to leave you with just some nice. This tickled me pink. Thank you. You are the voice in my head, earbuds during the day. I share all your rants and frustrations. Thank you for all you do. Hope YouTube does not delete this. Slava Ukraini. It says based in Ukraine. Chris C then says, me too, I'm a mechanic. I turn wrenches all day with JP's voice in my head. I love this. When I read articles, when I read articles, it's some British guy reading them in my head, to me in my head. I love that. I love the fact that I live rent-free in many of you guys' heads. As Archon Magos Augustus says, I've recently used in a professional English conversation the expression bish bash bosh. It came out of nowhere and I'm still reeling from the surprise. Should I sue you directly or the Labour Party? Yeah, brilliant. So thank you for allowing me to live rent free in your head. I'm sorry if you listen to me more than you do your partner, and if you have some weird English idioms and JP idioms that aren't even normal English floating around in your cranium, bouncing around and occasionally popping out. Sorry, not sorry. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon.